Football is undeniably the biggest sport in the world. Every week, hundreds of millions, if not billions, come together in some capacity to watch, play or even complain about the beautiful game, and unsurprisingly, it's gotten a bit competitive. However, despite there being a number of countries that boast a rich footballing CV, it always seems like there's one nation that is somehow above the rest in talent and prowess. Despite having just the 9th best league in the world with a revenue comparable to England's second tier, Brazil always seems to pump out the best players on the planet. From Ronaldinho to Pelé, Neymar to Ronaldo, Brazil's all-time greats are simply unmatched, and their national team is the most successful ever, winning a record 5 World Cup trophies. But just why are they so good? Brazil's complex relationship with football started in the late 1800s, having been brought over by British immigrants before spreading like wildfire throughout the entire population. It wouldn't be too long later where the first football clubs were created, consisting of upper-class Brazilians who were almost entirely of white European heritage, playing organised games in a style and format far more similar to the early European game than the style we expect of Brazilians today. And so it was away from these football clubs where we saw the real development of football in the Amazon, where similarly to much of Brazilian culture, it was the poorer Afro-Brazilian communities that got the ball rolling in the process of creating the greatest footballing nation on earth. These communities were often crowded and didn't have access to many amenities across the board, leading to a diverse culture which fused a hard-working mentality with music, dance and arts, and of course most importantly of all, a unique and expressive footballing style. Football is pretty much entirely played informally in small enclosed spaces, leading to a need for the players from these communities to be particularly good technically in order to shine, creating players that were simply better than the rest of the world on the ball. As the years passed, Brazil's professional clubs could no longer ignore the growing footballing culture in the country, with more and more players of working class origin making their way through the ranks, and by 1950 Brazil's two footballing cultures had been merged into one, and the national team, nicknamed the Seleção, had become arguably the strongest in the world. Important because they were about to host the World Cup for the first time ever. The Seleção breezed past all their competition across the tournament until their final game, where despite being favourites going into the match, Brazil suffered a painful 2-1 loss to Uruguay. 8 years later though, and a 17-year-old Pelé alongside other stars like Garrincha fired Brazil to their first ever World Cup success, something the national team grew a taste for over the coming years. By 1970, Brazil held the record for the most World Cup titles won, continuing to pump out talent. Important because over the next 2 decades, football began to change faster than ever before, creating the next important factor which boosted the talent factory of Brazil: money. Over the 70s and 80s, football, and particularly football in Europe, became far more commercial, giving European giants a spending power never seen before. Players like Falcao, Desailly and Adinho are among some of the first names to move to Europe during this period, where by the 1990 World Cup, 50% of Brazil's squad no longer played at home, compared to just 12 years earlier, where not a single member of the Seleção squad was playing outside of Brazil. The promise of a better life had become such an incentive for young Brazilians that it became a notable driving force in the production of young Brazilian footballers, not only for the players themselves but also for the clubs who realised they could make a significant profit by using their youth academies like businesses. And this can be seen through the ages Brazilian players started to make the switch. Falcao, Desailly and Adinho had all made their switch to Europe in the early 80s, aged 27, well into their prime years. However, by the time the 90s came round, players were leaving Brazil younger and younger. After featuring in the 1986 World Cup squads, Müller and Silas both moved to Europe aged 22. Romario was the same age when he made the switch to PSV, and Ronaldo was just 17 when he joined the same club just a few years later, with the Samba football factory officially in full flow. 2 World Cup wins and another final came in the years that followed, but with many other countries around the world attempting to copy this same model, there was a few things that set Brazil aside and allowed them to continue producing the best talent in the world well into the 21st century. If we rewind back to the start of life football had in Brazil, even after football clubs had started letting Afro-Brazilian and working class talent play for them, the street football culture that had been created would never leave. Subgenres of the sport that had been created like futsal and beach football are still huge in the country, and even to this day are often where most footballers start their journey, allowing pretty much all Brazilian players to have a base level of technical talent aiding their development once they reach academies, similar to the footballers we see coming from cage football in big cities across the UK and France. As well as this, another factor that helped Brazil pull away from countries with similar footballing cultures is the sheer size of their population. Back in 1950, when Brazil first hosted the World Cup, it had a very similar population to that of the UK. Fast forward to the current day, and Brazil's population is almost 150 million people stronger. And a higher population often means a higher potential talent pool to choose from. Over the years, there's been a number of factors that have led to Brazil often being regarded as the greatest footballing nation in the world, even throughout times when the national team isn't really winning. From Zico and Socrates in the 80s to Vinicius and Neymar in the modern day, it's almost impossible to imagine a Brazilian national not being seen as one of the best in the world, and that's largely down to a complex footballing, social and cultural history intertwining, which has led us to where we are right now, with Brazil on top of them all. Thank you all for watching this video. I hope you all enjoyed. I'll be back producing content as often as I can, so please subscribe if you enjoyed, and take care.